Hey, we're back with another video, and today we're gonna react to Farha, "Stumped" by Andrew on feminism. No women's rights without men. Unless they find a way to shrink us all down. That's all. Never mind. Anyway, let's go. Let's hop right in. No time to waste.
Yeah, so women can't make decisions about their own rights because they can't enforce their own rights. So since they have no enforcement mechanism other than men, all their rights come from men, so they can't actually be equal. There's always going to be a differential, and that's a necessary biological truth. It's not saying that women can't be equal in the eyes of men as far as, you can't murder them, abuse them, things like this, within the commons that you would do with men, but there can't actually be egalitarianism. It's not even possible because women have no enforcement mechanism. So since there's no enforcement mechanism, there's just it's a laughably absurd idea.
No, it's not a laughably absurd idea, dude. Like 90% of society actually follows the law. The only time you got to enforce something is the only time you got to enforce something with force is when something is not following the law. And not even 90%. It's like 99% of society follows the law. So whatever laws are put in place, most people will follow to stay themselves out of trouble. So I disagree with them on that.
It doesn't have no enforcement mechanism because women's rights are legally created by men. Is that what you mean? What do you mean?
Well, no, they're enforced by men. So in other words, if men collectively tomorrow say you have no rights, you don't have any anymore, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing any woman anywhere can do about it. That's just the truth of the world. If men collectively, and we do sometimes, men do anyway. I'm not grouping myself as a monolith, but men do this. In some nations, they just say, hey, women don't have rights, and they don't have rights, and there's nothing that they can do about it.
How would that happen in America, where we do have democracy and we're not just led by, I don't know, men using their physical strength to dominate us? Like, how could men tomorrow collectively say, you know what, like half our population, you no longer have rights, you're second.
Well, men tomorrow say there's no democracy in America, there's no democracy in America tomorrow either. If men tomorrow say that we're going to have a communist nation tomorrow, there will be a communist nation as well. So if men, as far as a monolith go, let's say, you don't even need 50, 100%, but let's just say 30%, something like this, say, we don't want democracy anymore, there isn't going to be a democracy anymore. They say they don't want communism, there isn't going to be, or they want communism, that's what it'll be. If they say they want socialism, that's what it'll be. So essentially, men are the holders of what society is going to look like, what the economic status is going to be, what everything is going to be, because they're the enforcement mechanism.
Okay, so if that's true, if men are the enforcement mechanism, why does that then mean that women's equality is a bad idea?
Well, I didn't say it was a bad idea. I mean, it is, but what my position is that it's laughable that egalitarianism is even possible because women have no way to enforce their rights. They have to use men to enforce their rights.
Unless they get in a society where it's just nothing but pure women, where they get away from men completely. And that's probably why a lot of women start thinking about decentering y'all. If you really think about it, like what he's saying and stuff, like he's saying it like, and then there's truth in what he's saying, but then that becomes a lot of danger for the women. So you can't be mad when they want to distance themselves from us when it comes to stuff like that.
So since they have to use men to enforce their rights, they don't really have any rights because all the rights come from men.
But neither do men, because men need other men to enforce their rights too. No one really has rights, to a degree.
Guys, one quick thing. The whole chat is complaining. I don't know which one of you guys is typing, but the typing noise is really, really loud. I don't know if you
Yeah,
can,
I hear it. I hear it too.
I don't know if you can tone down the noise or just keep your computer a little bit far away from your phone. There's just a lot of people.
Well, she's on it. Hang on. She's on a cell phone, and I'm not typing. So,
Farha, are you using your computer to take notes?
Yeah, I'm on my phone and computer, but
oh, okay.
also
Maybe you can just move your computer a little bit further from the phone so the audio doesn't come in.
okay.
Okay.
Continue.
Oh, that's my position. It's absurd to have any belief in egalitarianism on its face because it's not actually possible except through the graciousness of men.
It's absurd to have egalitarianism because women cannot physically enforce their own rights, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah, so egalitarianism is not, it's not true. It's not real. It's false. It's only possible through men, in other words. It's not possible through women. Women can't be equal.
All societies are false to a degree because it's all under the control of whoever's in power at the time. And whoever's in power can dictate whatever the society is going to be. So if you want to get that technical with it, then you can technically say that all societies are false, technically.
Unless men allow them to be equal, which means it's paradoxical because...
And men need the collective of men for things to go the way they want it to go as well. Under his premise, it falls in line for the same premise as men. If 30% of men decided it's going to be socialism and you didn't want it to be socialism, but you're a man, you still have to fall in line with it. Everyone has to fall in line with it, which makes men dangerous. Which also is the reason why I believe when I heard this study that women are better leaders, it makes sense. It actually makes sense.
This means that they're never going to be equal because men are going to always be the arbiters of what that equality is because women can't enforce it. So,
but why does the notion of egalitarianism have to be predicated on physical strength, or like who gets to enforce it?
Well, what else could it be predicated on?
Intelligence.
Principles of like what's best for society.
And what happens if somebody violates those principles?
Equal,
Sure.
Like, why would it be based off the enforcement?
What happens if somebody violates those principles?
What do you mean?
Well, so if you have a society in which you have laws and government and things like this and whatever social contracts you come up with, what happens if one side violates those principles, or a person or an individual or a group violates those principles?
And the group as a collective attack that person and put them in jail. I think a bunch of women could do that. I think they could. I think a bunch of women could take on one man.
What would you do with them? You would, well, I would think arrest them maybe, or punish them, or do something punitive, or put them in prison or something like that. And so you're right back to the enforcement mechanism again. So there's really no way around it. The enforcement mechanism is from men, will always be from men. And so it's paradoxical to say that women can have equal rights, because even if they do have equal rights, it's just because men have allowed them to.
But does that make women's equality laughable, or like an absurd idea?
Well, it's paradoxical on its face, so it has to be laughable, because there is never going to be such thing as women's equality. Just an illusion thereof, because if it's decided by even a small majority of men, majority being like 10, 15, 20%, they just won't have it anymore, and there's nothing they can do about it. So
that's not true, because 10, 15, 20% don't want women to have rights now. And as a collective, it doesn't work.
Essentially, always, they have to defer to men for this.
I guess, would you apply the same logic to race? Like if someone's a racial minority and then a larger racial majority just decides, like, we're going to overpower you physically and with enforcement mechanisms?
Nope, it wouldn't work the same way. It would just be the same man paradox. So if men decided to take rights away from a single group of men, they could do that, yes. But let's say if it was a racial minority of women or something like this that wanted to take away rights, or even if it was a racial majority of women who wanted to take away rights from a minority of men, they likely couldn't do it.
No, I think they could. I think they could. If they had the power over the society, they could.
Without using men as enforcement. So it's always
okay, so he added on without using men as enforcement. Okay.
Back to this no matter what. So it'll be, in this particular case, you're talking about race, it would be, yes, groups of men can take away rights for whatever reason based on whatever proxy they have from other men, and have always been able to do so.
Okay, I guess I just disagree that makes women's equality laughable, because we would need a male.
Well, then explain how you can be equal.
Because I don't think equality is predicated on physical strength. I don't think equality is necessarily predicated on whether you're able to enforce it yourself.
So what's it predicated on? What's a right predicated on? Where do you think
competence
right comes from, absent enforcement of the right?
I mean, conservatives will argue that, a lot of, fetuses in the womb have rights, even though they can't physically defend themselves, that they're still worthy of human rights.
So what you're saying there...
They defend for themselves, so does that mean that, fetuses shouldn't be deserving of human rights if you are pro-life, because women could just decide to just abort them? Like, I just
Well,
don't
so this
think
is this
that
is
an
this is question begging, right? So I'm asking you, where do rights come from? You say, well, conservatives will say that children in the womb have rights. Well, that may be true or it may be false, but that doesn't actually answer my question, which I'm asking you. Where do you think rights come from?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is where they don't come from is physical strength.
I don't care where they don't come from.
Yourself.
I want to know where they do come from. Where do they come from?
I guess it's subjective. Like some people think it comes from just a religious sense of you're a person, you're deserving of human rights, you're deserving of prosperity and happiness. Or you could argue that, I guess it depends what you think are fundamental rights, like which rights.
Well, that's the question I'm asking you, is if you don't have an explanation or grounding for why you think that people should have rights at all, or where rights even come from, then what else could they be other than an enforcement mechanism by groups of people for what they think other people should be allowed to do or not do?
I don't think because I don't have a clean definition of where rights come from, that means that I have to just defer that rights should just come from who can physically enforce them.
Where else could they come from then?
Ideas. It doesn't just only have to come from physical force. Ideas.
If there's no clean definition, it means that tyranny is what dictates rights.
Well, no. Well, in your case,
Technically, yeah, that's what you're saying, dude. Tyranny only dictates rights.
for democracy, you might say it's a tyranny of majority, or you could say that it's not a tyranny because it's the majority. It wouldn't really matter which way you framed it. The truth of the matter is, though, is that you have to at some point contend with this issue, which is if you don't think that there's a grounding for rights and they're just all subjective based on cultures and people groups and things like this all over the world, that's fair enough. But then you would have to also say in that same breath, if they're all just subjective, then who's giving them to who? And who can take them away from who?
Sure. So I guess rights are established within a civilization. Or usually within national borders. It's decided like what do people need in order to have
Rights are established by people, but they're carried out by force. It's both. Like, they're both actually right to a degree.
a prosperous life or to have like an equal opportunity. I'm just saying usually the physical enforcement is there to ensure that to ensure a bottom line, to ensure that people at the bottom, even if they're handicapped, I just don't understand why this example is you're using it to apply it to women.
Well, the Greeks said that without law there can be no freedom. And what they're saying there is if you don't have an enforcement arm for what keeps you free, being things like a military, things like police, things that are enforcement, laws, in other words, you can't actually enforce any of these rights. How could you possibly do it? So since men are the enforcement arm, there's really no way out of the fact that you get your rights from them, whether you like it or not. You could say that egalitarianism as a principle is great, but that really is just begging the question again as to who's giving you your rights. You're not giving them to yourself. So in other words, Farha, you didn't wake up one morning with rights of which you gave yourself. You have rights which other people allow you to have and can easily take away if they so chose, and there wouldn't be anything you could do about it. That's my whole point.
Sure, your entire neighborhood one day can just decide, we hate Andrew, he's annoying, he's not mowing his lawn, let's go kill him. Does that mean your rights are allowed?
Not if they were women. Not if they were women. They could do that if they were men, though. I agree. I would agree that men could
I'm
likely...
pretty sure 20 women could come and just decide we're going to overtake Andrew because he's not mowing his lawn.
I think it would be far more difficult for them to enforce it than 20 men. Wouldn't you agree? And I think that they would probably appeal to men in order to exercise the enforcement, which is what they do right now, which is what women do right now. They appeal to men to exercise all enforcement of all of their rights and all of the things that they want. They can't appeal to women because women can't enforce their rights and never have been able to.
5 women or 3 women, 2 men come tomorrow, kidnap you, tie you to a chair, and start beating you, and I say, oh, well, he can't fight back right now. We're the one who decides if he eats or sleeps or gets water. Does that mean your rights are laughable? The basis of your rights are laughable? That makes no sense.
So what you're... No.
Enforcement mechanisms are subjective, so if I decide
hang on.
to under a tyrannical situation and torture you...
Actually, you're making my point.
Laughable.
You're making my point for me. So if my rights are being violated and I'm unable to physically do something about it, so 2 men and 3 women have tied me up they're now depriving me of life, liberty, and happiness by doing this, and I can't physically do something about this, who would I appeal to do something about this?
If you can't appeal to someone, it means the basis of your rights are laughable.
Yeah, unless you can tell me what the basis of rights are, which is what I've asked you in the beginning.
The legal basis of your rights.
Yeah, I know, but what is the legal basis of the rights come from what?
In America, it comes from the Constitution.
Which came from?
Currently, the Constitution will only be amended legally. Like, I don't think men can just overpower that right now.
Really? They tried to before in the Civil War.
Currently,
well, what's the difference between now and then? They tried to once before. What do you mean? So if men don't like the hand that they've gotten, they don't like the nation that they're in, they don't like the government that they have, they don't like the circumstances they're in collectively, they seem to be able to do something about that. They can overthrow the entire nation, for instance. Can you point to a country in history you can ever think of where women have collectively overthrown the nation with force?
Okay, so by enforcement mechanism, you don't mean through, like, legal or civil measures, you mean through, like, revolution and...
Those are both physical measures. A legal measure is a physical enforcement. How else could it work? Like, what stops you from breaking the law? It's a penalty, right? Doesn't somebody enforce the penalty?
I'm just saying revolutions could be spearheaded by anyone. I just don't understand why this is, like, such a gendered idea for you, that, like, women's rights are laughable because a majority could overtake them. Like, that's the case with any larger group of people. It's not the case.
So, for instance, let's say you had a dynamic where you had 20% men to a...
Keep in mind, this is a Christian man talking.
8% female ratio. The men would still be in charge. We know this.
I don't know if that's true.
Well, not only can I demonstrate that this is true by showing you nations post-war, where a lot of the men, up to 2/3 in some cases, were completely wiped out and the men were still in charge. The reason is because even then, the power dynamic is it's sloped such in the favor of men that women still need them to enforce their rights. Women are unable to physically do this type of work themselves, at least collectively. There might be individual women who are able to be police officers, great military officials, things like this. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm talking about on average and in generalities here. And in general, no, women can't enforce rights and have never been able to. Their rights collectively come from men.
Game the hero.
Well, to be honest, that was kind of like a whole lot of Yeah, he did good. He's right. I can't really argue too much on that one, but he made a good point in that one, y'all. Anyways, I'm out, y'all. Peace.